Hi, everyone. Hi, Anthony. Hi, Jeffrey. Good. Maria, what's happening? Hi, Cody. Give people a few minutes to trickle in. Okay. I think let's rock and roll and kick this off here. So, hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jocelyn, and I'm the Director of West Coast Strategy at Headset. I really want to start by saying today, just bless everyone. I'm really glad that you chose to spend your time to be here with us today. There is a lot going on in our world right now. I know there's a lot going on in Oregon right now, and I know that we all know that there's a lot going on in the cannabis industry right now. And my hope is that we honor your time today by providing insights that you find very valuable. I've been a part of the cannabis industry and with Headset for over 2 years now, and I'm really passionate about talking about what we do because I don't know of any other company that's providing real-time insights through sophisticated tools like Headset does. My days are spent on Zoom calls like this, and I'm talking to people that are working at brands, people working at retail stores, associations like ORCA and OCA, people that are fighting for policy, a lot of advocates for equity programs, and people working at ancillary companies. And whatever side of the industry or supply chain that you work on, I'm finding that people are really excited about using data to be able to make their businesses more efficient. And so our goal here at Headset is to really help people and companies either make best use of their own data or make best use of market data so that we can have a healthy supply chain, because a healthy supply chain is going to create efficiencies for us, and data really helps create those efficiencies. So last week we had some really exciting news. We turned on our Insights Pulse and Premium platform for Oregon, which now gives everyone a real-time read on the market. And we could not be more excited to be doing this webinar today because our team worked really hard over the last few months. And so I would like to introduce a few of our team members who helped make this possible. So Blake, Dylan, Nate, please introduce yourselves.
Yeah, so I'll start. My name is Blake Ferry. I am on the analytics team here at Headset. I've been at Headset for about 7 months. Prior to Headset, I was working in consulting in San Francisco and also spent a couple years working in analytics at Amazon. What I do at Headset specifically is I often work with retailers or brands, kind of help solve their business problems with data. And I'm looking forward to walking you guys through some of our Oregon analytics here today.
Hey everyone, my name is Dylan. For Headset, I spread the love and help everyone connect with our retailer platform, which is an add-on to point-of-sale systems. And it's where we sample our data from for these insights. Prior to Headset, I've been at Headset for just over a year now. And prior to Headset, I was studying environmental science up in Bellingham, Washington, and running track there as well.
Hey everybody, I'm Nate Obermark. I'm the account executive here for Oregon. So a lot of my days, like Jocelyn, in front of Zoom meetings, but getting the data in your hands. So been at Headset for a year on next Wednesday. So I'll be celebrating my 1-year anniversary next week. And come from a hospitality background. Worked for a company called Toast, which was basically a technology platform for restaurants. So I will let Joss take it away. Nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We'll leave our emails at the end, so if you want to reach out to any of us individually, please feel free to do so. But so today, Blake is going to walk us through an analysis that's going to give y'all a better understanding of the sales growth that we're seeing in Oregon, what percentage of sales to different categories and products, and a breakdown of demographic spending as well as customer wallet share. All of these insights should really be used by people that are either working at retail stores, people that are making products, and investors that are looking to have an understanding of what's happening in Oregon. I say that these insights should be used by these different parts of the supply chain, but really this information should be insightful to all. So before we get into some of the trends, I want to give a little bit of background on Headset. So we are a team of 50 people, about 50 people, and we're headquartered in Seattle. And our founders, Cy, Brian, and Scott, started Leafly. So they each have over 10 years experience in the cannabis industry. And they started Headset a little over 5 years ago. And in this 5 years, we raised over $18 million in funding from leading cannabis investors. We've tracked over $11 billion in transactions. And we're working with over 1,200 retailers in 31 markets throughout the US and Canada. Our team members come from backgrounds that retail, consumer packaged goods, and technology. And so over the last 5 years, we've really built the most sophisticated analytics software that's out there. And we pride ourselves in the software because it really was built to provide an out-of-the-box solution for everything that an analyst would want without having to build it themselves. So the Headset ecosystem consists of 3 main pieces of software. The first is our Retail Pulse software. This is 4 different modules that allows a retailer to better understand their inventory, their sales staff performance, tracking promotions, and benchmarking your store sales versus the rest of the state. These first 4 modules, these are free for retailers. We also have a premium version of this platform that is called Retailer Premium. And this has another 4 modules that really goes deeper into understanding who your customer is, what products they purchase, where they're coming from. The second piece of our ecosystem is a platform called Bridge. And this platform is a VMI solution. So this allows a retailer to share real-time SKU inventory with the brands direct to really eliminate any out-of-stock events. And then the last platform is our Insights platform. So this is all the real-time aggregated market data. So all of this data that Blake is about to walk through is pulled and analyzed directly from our Insights platform. So this means that you can do these types of analysis too, but in more detail for your own company. So all of the data that Blake's going to walk through is adult use sales data, and this is from participating retailers' point of sale systems. And the way we think about data here at Headset is it goes through a really intensive process, which is a combination of using AI, robots, algorithms, and then humans to cleanse, normalize, project, and most importantly, protect the data so that ultimately we can then give this aggregated market read. So with that, let's get into some data. So I'm going to kick this over to you, Blake.
Great. Let me just pull up my screen here. Just do you mind unsharing for a second?
Yes.
See if I can pop on there. Perfect. All right, I think you guys should be able to see my screen now. And with that, let's get started. So first, let's talk quickly about what we're going to go through today. So I kind of look at this presentation like there's 3 sections. So the first one is really going to be focused on top line market data. So this includes things like state level sales, category level sales, and a few growth metrics. The next section is demographic data. So here we're going to cover things like gender, age group, and some other customer wallet metrics. And the last final section is going to be basket data. So covering things like basket analysis, basket composition metrics, things along those lines. And I'd also like to note, just before I start presenting, that in every section, I kind of like to start with really high level information. And then as I dig into each section, I get more and more granular with detail, just so you guys can kind of have an expectation of what we're going to do today. All right, so first we need to set the table here by giving a little more context to this Oregon market. So here we're looking at a snapshot of Q2 2020 adult use cannabis sales in California, Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. And that's all shown on the left y-axis. And year-over-year sales growth, that's shown on the right y-axis. So those are those dots there. And the first thing you'll notice is that Oregon only produced 262 million in sales during Q2 of this year, which is second to last among the states shown above. But that's not really a good indication of kind of the story here. So when we look at this year's Q2 data against last year's Q2 data in Oregon, we actually see that sales grew at over 50%, which is the largest growth rate in all the markets that we're looking at right there. You can see that dot really high and to the right. And so this tells us that while Oregon is a slightly more mature market, it's really still showing signs of quite a bit of sales momentum, especially when you compare it to other kind of advanced mature markets that have been around for a few years, like Colorado and Washington. And those 2 states only saw 23% growth and 34% year-over-year sales growth, respectively. So again, that just gives you a sense of scale for where Oregon is going. So to give that Q2 data from Oregon a little more color, here we're going to dig into state totals for Oregon, Washington, California over the course of 2020, so all the West Coast states. And there are a couple things you're going to notice on the first glance. So the first is the California market. Those are the dark blue bars there. And the second is that Oregon's actually the smallest of the 3 in terms of total state sales. And while these are kind of interesting takeaways, I guess they mask the main point here, which is growth. From January 2020 to July 2020, Oregon sales grew at 49.8% from 62 million to 94 million. And that outpaced California growth in the same period, which was 16.1%. So that's roughly 3x of that growth. And when you compare it to Washington, which had 25.4% growth over the same period, we're looking at 2x in Oregon. So that again gives you really now a sense of the scale that you're seeing in Oregon. So now if we want to dig one layer further, which is looking at, across the course of 2020, we can look at year-over-year sales growth by month. And again, I'm looking at the 3 West Coast markets here. And what we're charting here is the year-over-year sales growth by month for 2020. So this particular graphic shows a few interesting trends by viewing it in a linear format. The first trend is how consumers in the Pacific Northwest responded to the outbreak of COVID in March. So in addition to the initial hurdle of being considered essential businesses, cannabis retailers faced a lot of different issues, everything from supply chain trouble, increased regulations, and often that affected how consumers were allowed to interact with their stores. So think about things like curbside pickup, the limitation of the number of customers that they're actually allowed in the store at a given time, and the actual customer flow through the store itself. But despite all these challenges, Oregon actually had a peak there in May at 61.9% year-over-year growth, which is just incredible. But conversely, if you look at California, that's that dark blue line, you're really seeing that precipitous drop that occurred during COVID. We're not quite sure if that's really bottomed out yet in California. And to step back for a second, you're not seeing August data in here. Our data is real time. We do have August data. We weren't able to get it back in time. But what you can tell is if I extrapolate that out, I can tell you that Oregon is still maintaining a 40% plus growth rate year over year in the month of August. And we're actually seeing California is still slightly dropping. They're down at 26%. So we're actually seeing these trends continue into this most recent month. Okay, so now that we have the kind of the high level understanding of the Oregon market over time, both in terms of the sales and kind of that growth and scale, we can now start diving into the categories those dollars are being spent in. So here what we're looking at is a bar chart that's showing Q2 2020 sales mix by category. And the first thing you'll notice here is that Oregon and Washington have very similar category mixes. The only really discernible difference between Oregon and Washington is that in Oregon, we see slightly more spent on flower and slightly less than on pre-roll in comparison to Washington. And the second thing I'd actually call out here is that not all markets have consistent category splits. And we'll touch on Oregon in depth in the next slide, but states that tend to have higher rates of canna tourism, so think about places like Colorado, California, Nevada, they've really seen pronounced changes in category splits. So again, we're looking at Q2 data here. So this is during kind of COVID, during the pandemic. And so we've seen that change from Q1, which again, we had a lot of out-of-state consumers. So a little different category splits. And so that last slide gave us kind of a broad perspective of where category mixes currently are among states. But in this slide, we'll actually kind of examine more of a historical view of the Oregon market in particular. So looking at Oregon's category sales mix over the trailing 12 months, we can see that's pretty consistent. But if we look really closely, we can actually see two small inflection points. The first of which is in August, September 2019. And that's when illicit vapor pen products caused deaths, hospitalizations in a lot of states across the US, and Oregon was no exception there. They actually had 2 deaths that were linked to illicit vapor pen products. And as you might imagine, this caused quite a panic among cannabis consumers who typically bought legal regulated vapor pen products. And that drove a pretty big nosedive in terms of vapor pen sales. But we've kind of seen that that trend kind of self-regulate and stabilize. And now we see roughly 14% of sales of Oregon are actually to vapor pen products. In the second inflection point here, so we'll jump down, again, I keep mentioning COVID, but that February, March timeframe. And here we can actually see a couple different things. So the first is which edible sales jump almost a whole percent. That's that 8.5% to 9.4% jump there in category share sales. And the next one is actually flower sales jumping from 51% to almost 52%. And these temporary increases in category mixes are really driven by customers doing 2 things. They're looking for safe and cost-effective ways to consume cannabis during a pandemic and all these different shutdowns. And so just to dive a little bit further into that, I want to outline kind of those 2 different responses I just mentioned. So when you actually think about safe ways to consume cannabis during COVID, that's specifically pointed at the edibles comment there. Because COVID is a respiratory virus, a lot of consumers transitioned into purchasing non-shareable, non-inhalable products like edibles. And that's pretty consistent across a lot of markets. And you also notice that I mentioned the term kind of cost effective. And so what do I mean by that? I mean that, there were a lot of different economic impacts of COVID. And so we see, there's less consumer disposable income to spend on things like cannabis. And so what happens in these times, it's kind of similar to alcohol in this way, and that sales don't necessarily go down. What happens is consumers tend to spend on more cost-effective products. So in cannabis specifically, those would be kind of items like pre-roll or flower, where you're getting kind of the most bang for your buck, so to speak. Great. So now that we've kind of you have a sense for that market size and that category data, we'll kind of take this line of analysis a little bit further into, so who is actually buying cannabis? So this graphic, again, is to set the stage for kind of like the current state. We're looking at Q2 2020 sales mix by state, by age group. And one thing to point out here is that we use a very specific set of definitions for age groups. These are the definitions that are actually defined by the Pew Research Center. So pretty common type of age definitions there. You can see the silent generation, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. Again, very kind of standard definitions. And so there are quite a few generalizations that actually kind of hold true across most markets in terms of cannabis sales when we talk about generational data. So when I say that, I mean, millennials typically make up about half of recreational sales in every state, followed by Gen X, who roughly make about a quarter of that data, that sales data, I should say. The remaining fourth is kind of split between baby boomers and Gen Z. And Oregon is somewhat unique in that sales skew slightly to older customers in comparison to other states. So for example, when we sales share from Generation Z, baby boomers and Gen Xers account for roughly 40% of sales. The only other state that has that kind of alignment in that metric is actually Nevada with roughly 40%. And my guess is why Nevada is currently that way in Q2 is that obviously during COVID, you're seeing a lot less tourism come into Las Vegas, specifically where most cannabis dispensaries are. And so you're seeing a lot of the kind of the locals and the older demographics are starting to kind of take up more of sales share. And so I would also note that it's really important to think about Gen Z. So they're only the fourth largest sales group. But again, it's by far the most rapidly growing segment. And that's mostly due to the fact they're actually aging into the market right now. So to put that comment in a little more perspective, if we look at July sales and year-over-year sales growth in Oregon, we see that Gen Z sales grew roughly like 140%, which is pretty astounding. And the next fastest growing age group, and it's actually coincidentally the next youngest one, which is millennials, they grew at 53.6%. So still really high growth. But again, if you got to put that in perspective against Gen Z, which again is just that's what's driving a lot of the growth in many of these states, the young generation Gen Z. And so now we're going to move to kind of the second flavor of demographic data, which is gender data. So here we're looking at a line chart that shows month-over-month sales growth by gender in the state of Oregon. And just to set the stage, Oregon has the highest percentage of female customers out of all the US states that Headset covers. And that they come in at roughly 39% of total consumers in the state. So the state with the second highest percentage of female customers is Washington. They had 36% of total customers were female customers. And so in this graphic, we can see that leading up to the end of 2019, growth is really similar between genders. But then again, from December through April, so COVID rolls around, we start to see sales growth among female consumers outpace that of males by quite a bit. And after that kind of that one little aberration there in May, we've continued to see female customers grow at a rapid clip. And it's particularly interesting actually to look at how female consumer sales growth in Oregon has noticeably outpaced that of males during the COVID epidemic, or pandemic, I should say. So in this slide, we're actually going to kind of pivot off of the last slide a little bit. So still, we're going to look at gender data here. But we're going to look now in terms of how those two buckets, how they really spend their cannabis dollars. So another term for that is cannabis wallet. And so the way to look at this graphic is imagine that let's say on average, a consumer had $100 to spend, split out male and female, so $100 each. So how would they allocate that $100 within cannabis categories? So just using the data we have here as an example, if the average male consumer wallet shows 7% for edibles, you could expect them to spend 7 out of the $100 to edibles. And the main takeaway from this chart above is that male consumers spend relatively more on inhalable products, particularly concentrates and flower. Flower being really the big mainstay category in cannabis right now. In many states, it's around 40 to 50% of sales. So the only exception with that inhalable comment would be vapor pens and pre-rolls. And in Oregon, these are actually inhalable categories where female consumers spend comparatively more. And on the other kind of the other end of the spectrum, on female consumers, they tend to over-index their spend in non-inhalable categories. So think about your beverages, capsules, edibles, tinctures, and topicals. And it's probably worth noting that this kind of category wallet spend is pretty similar across most states. So while Oregon has kind of that kind of unique tendency in the vapor pen and pre-rolls for females to over-index there, for the most part, you're going to see pretty consistent demographic data in that regard across West Coast states. Okay, so for here, I'm now going to kind of step away from demographic data and kind of set my sights on a different kind of subset of customers. And here we're going to look at specifically concentrate customers. So these would be customers that purchased at least one concentrate product in a given month. So we're looking at their category split spend there over time. So in August 2019, just before the vape crisis hits, it's interesting to see that concentrate customers spent about 18.2% of their wallets on vapor pen products. But this obviously falls pretty drastically with the vape crisis. And by the time COVID crops up in March, they're actually only spending about 11.5%, which kind of looks to be the new baseline for concentrate customers. But if we look at where they're moving that spend, when I say over time, they're shifting their spend out of vapor pens, they're actually reconsolidating back into concentrates. So you can see concentrates there are looking at that light blue lavender, or not light blue, lavender bar there at the bottom. So you can see how they're reconsolidating their money back into the kind of their baseline category, which is concentrates. And it's important to note our data, we can spin this on any category we'd like. So I just wanted to use concentrates as a specific example here.
Hey, Blake, we had one question from Tim Fitzpatrick, which I was hoping you could answer regarding the gender split, about the sample size of gender data for Oregon and Washington.
So when we say sample size, I don't have a specific number on the top of my head right now for the number of consumers that we collect data from. But all the data we collect comes from retailers' point of sale systems, and that's typically comes through things like loyalty programs. So, if we're connected to, I'll make up numbers, 100 retailers, and each of those retailers, let's say it's 25% of their sales. We typically see, hundreds to thousands of different customers that come into retailers at our sample stores. So again, if I had to take a ballpark kind of swings on the spot right here, it'd probably be, thousands. We're looking at tens of thousands of customers. And that will really vary by state. Some states it's not as common to collect demographic information, but in West Coast states like Washington, California, Oregon, we see a good amount of customer data come in, and in a way where we feel very confident that that's market reflective. I hope that answered the question, I think. And if you guys have questions, please go ahead and keep throwing them in the Q&A. And if we don't get to them during the presentation, we'll be happy to take them after as well. Thanks for stopping me, Josh. If anything, other questions come in, I can't really see them, so just let me know. Cool. Well, so that was actually a good stopping point because that's like the second third of the original third I talked about. So now that we've talked about kind of the top line market growth scale, we've talked about category information. We've talked about demographic information. Now we're actually going to move into basket analysis, which is kind of the last piece here and my personal favorite here. So what we're looking at on this first slide is average basket size, and that's on the left axis of those column bars. And just as a quick reminder, basket size is just the total dollar value of each transaction on average. So here you can see in Oregon that huge bump kind of in March, April. So kind of around that mid to low 30s range and now up above 40. And so COVID's very interesting to me. So it's very interesting in terms of trends specifically. So when we look at that bar in March, if we're following that line graph, which is actually graphing out the month-over-month growth rate of basket size, you can see that huge spike, which is 16.5% at the peak of that curve there, sending that average basket size up to $38. This has really continued to grow over time. And as of July, the average basket size in Oregon is almost $43. So there's two components that are really driving that basket size. So when you think about the basket, you have to think about the number of items in every basket, and then you have to think about the price of each item in the basket. And so what we'll do is we'll dig in this next slide to kind of figure out why we're seeing that sustained growth, what factors are actually driving that. And I also point out that increased basket size it's pretty universal in cannabis right now, whether you're looking at Canadian data, US states data. It just varies on the amounts, but we're really seeing kind of that flat kind of trajectory over the first few months of the year, and then really just spiking up and has remained really high since COVID came to the US in March. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is we're looking at those two components that I was just talking about. So we're looking at the average item price. We're looking at the average item number of items in a basket. And so what I did here is I narrowed down the time frame to be the last 6 months because I really want to focus in on what's driving that growth from February to March and onwards. So what we find is that initial 16.5% jump in basket size is driven really by equal parts items per basket and average item price. And on the other hand, when we look at the next month, so that's the March to April, where we saw an 11% increase in basket size, the growth is clearly driven by a small increase in average item price and a very large increase in number of items per basket. So the specific numbers I'm talking about there, that's the 2.1 to 2.3 average items in a basket. So that's a 10.5% increase. Which when you're talking about average items in a basket is pretty big. And we look over this trend over the last 3 months, we see the average basket and the two drivers of growth have really remained flat, kind of suggesting that consumer purchasing behaviors have kind of stabilized in that regard. So what we're kind of seeing during this COVID purchasing is kind of becoming our new norm right now, or at least until we have, COVID we have vaccine for it or some other solution. But I would expect that to stay the same in the next few months. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of take a different lens at baskets, and it's going to be kind of looking deeper into the basket and understanding what categories are actually present in baskets. So in the graphic above, we're looking at basket penetration in Oregon over the last 12 months. And basket penetration is defined as the percentage of total baskets containing an item from a given category. So what we see here is that, again, towards the advent of COVID, there are succinct increases in basket penetration for both flower and edibles. But notice that as the pandemic progresses into May, we actually see these basket penetration rates begin to fall. Interestingly enough, these decreases in basket penetration are mirrored with a sizable increase in pre-roll basket penetration, which increased over 13% over the same period. So if I don't know if I can get my mouse on here. So when I'm talking that 13% increase, I'm really looking at this dip in March in pre-rolls. People are kind of figuring out, oh, maybe pre-rolls, something shareable, maybe not the best purchase for me right now. That's why they're moving towards something they can consume on their own, something like flower. And then you see as the pandemic kind of progresses on, people are then starting to buy, looking at pre-rolls as a good add-on item, something that's cost effective that they can actually looking to use on their own.
Hey, Blake, another question, another great question from Tim. Could you clarify about how we're defining concentrates versus vapes? Because as an example, in Oregon, many vapes are called cannabis concentrate.
Yes, so when I say vapor pen products, I mean specifically all-in-one disposables, cartridges, refills, those things. When I'm talking about concentrates, I'm talking about kind of your dabbable, consumable products, things like live resin, waxes, shatter, things like that. So that's kind of where we draw the line between the two. So anything that's not in a cartridge specifically, we would kind of pull into the concentrate category. Okay, I think I got everything from that one I wanted. All right, so this last slide is basket composition. So the way to read this graphic is the height of the bar there is going to represent the average basket size for a basket containing the category on the x-axis. And the average basket size is then split between money allocated to the given category and money that goes to other categories. So for example, if we're going to look at the data that we have in here, we can see that baskets containing flower products on average have a basket size of $43.58. 82% of that, or roughly $36, goes to flower products, and the remaining 18% goes to other categories. That's roughly $8. So this suggests when customers are buying flower, most of their basket is actually made up of flower products, and they actually have a small amount going to other categories. And in this specific case, you could actually kind of infer that customers are likely buying things like pre-roll or rolling papers to go with their flower, so the smaller add-on items. And conversely, if you look at something like beverages, where dollars to beverages about 35% of the average basket containing beverages, the beverage category, I should say, this tells us when on the kind of the opposite example of that. So when beverages are purchased, they're likely an add-on item in the purchase itself, versus again on flower, where when people are purchasing flower, it's the predominant item in that basket. So I know that was a lot. So again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we can talk about them in a minute. But now I'm going to toss it back to Jocelyn here.
Wonderful. Blake, that was so awesome. Thank you very much for that. It's really exciting to see this level of detail for Oregon and all in real time. So we have some resources that I want to point you all to, because there are some wonderful free resources for you. So as I mentioned, we just launched Insights in Oregon late last week or 2 weeks ago at this point. And so we have an industry report that goes into more detail about what Blake went through today. So you can go to our website and get access to that. We also did a pricing analysis, which is on our blog. And then I'm going to add in to the chat box right here. So a lot of this data that Blake went through, as I mentioned, this is pulled directly from our Insights platform. So there's two pieces to this. There's the Pulse platform, which is free market data. So I just put in a link in the chat box, so y'all can go and sign up for that and get access to being able to see market data across the 8 markets that we're reporting on. We just launched or went live with Michigan yesterday, which is really exciting. So you can now compare and see how each of these states or markets compares against each other. And if you want to do more of these types of analysis on your own and take all of this and explore a particular segment or category that you're working within, that's when you would want to use our Insights Premium platform. And that would be, if you're interested in that, Nate is going to be your go-to guy there. He'd be happy to set up time with you. And if you're a retailer that's interested in getting set up on either our Pulse or Premium platforms, you can reach out to Dylan. But yeah, please check out these free resources because there's a lot of great information, and just want to make sure that y'all know this is available and free for you. So we'll open up to some questions now. Okay, we've got a question from Joe Sarantino. What is cultivation? I'm not entirely sure in the what.
I can take that one. So when we reference cultivation on a category level, those are products that stores will sell, like seeds, kind of anything that you would use, not necessarily the accessories of helping you grow, but the actual seeds itself. So cannabis seeds, packs of those, things like that. It's not, and that's something that's not part of our typical set of categories. Sometimes we include in our data in our Insights product and in our retail product, when we have standardized categories, the 9 standardized categories used, that would not be included. And it makes it's a very, very tiny percent of sales. We're talking like basis points. So that's why we tend to just not typically do much analysis with it.
Cool. Any other questions here? Okay, Rob, is there a way to drill down into individual dispensaries, individual zip codes, counties in Oregon? It would be helpful to ask the questions that Blake just addressed at this level of granularity. Yeah, no, we get this question a lot for all of our markets. One of the things that, the biggest thing that we take into consideration here at Headset is making sure that we protect all of our retailers. And so we don't break out anything into individual zip codes or into municipalities. And the reason for this is because there could be some areas, there's only one dispensary. So everyone would then know that shop sales. And so right now, we are not breaking it out in that capacity.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, we do quite a bit. We don't do in our standardized products kind of what your questions pointed at, which is very granular level of detail geographically. But we also offer what's called analysis as a service, which I do quite a bit of work on. And I recently had a client need some help. They were looking to open a store in the Bay Area, and so I did quite a bit of like Bay Area specific analysis for them. They don't receive any information on, again, what Jocelyn referred to as like zip codes, cities, anything like that. But we kind of get like a longitudinal, latitudinal range of like where the stores are, and we provide metrics on that specific. But that would be kind of an ad hoc consulting kind of project that we could do for you.
We've got another question about how the demographics data is collected, driver's license, loyalty program APIs. So yes, just to reiterate, all this data is coming directly from the point of sale system. So if there's a loyalty program set up within the point of sale system, that's how that information gets. Okay. Regional data. So Tim, I think that was answered in that. How much of the cannabis sales are flowing into Idaho? Oh, that is a really good question. And I'm not sure that we could answer that one, but I know that we did specifically look at some of the bordering cities to understand, because we understand this is happening. Blake, I don't know if you have.
Yes, we tend not to do quite too much analysis on that, as cannabis is not legal in Idaho. But we do see quite a bit of growth in stores that are located in, I guess, border cities, if you would like to call it that. So any of those kind of areas that you see on the border of Washington with Idaho, or on Oregon with Idaho, you do see that those stores do fairly well. But we don't have really specific metrics that we really dig into there.
But that's a great question. So we have another couple questions from John. So regarding the size, the data on the size of the retailers, how many bud tenders they have. So all of that data is available to the individual retailer within their own platform, but we don't publish anything on the number of bud tenders that retailers have within our insights platform. Though I do think that's an interesting question that I would be curious about, but we don't, that's not in our insights platform, but certainly in your retail platform. And to your second question, I'm assuming the point of sale has this data set, not sure if this passes into headset. So yeah, a lot of, the point of sales, if they are connected into a loyalty program and they're this data, again, because headset is connected via an API connection to the point of sale systems, we can pull in all of that data, and that's how we're then reporting on this within the insights platform. So whatever is coming from the point of sale system is what we see at headset if we're connected to that point of sale. The most user-friendly loyalty programs. Which ones give Headset the most data, most daily users, best for growing dispensaries business? Dylan, do you want to answer that question since you work more closely with?
Had to find that unmute button there. The more friendly ones are going to be either Spring Big or Sprout Analytics. We find that those two are head over heels doing better than the other ones in the industry. And they're also actively searching for an integration with Headset. So things like, if you want to know, instead of those two companies are taking it onto themselves to say, instead of just throwing like a blanket, hey, there's 10% off today, come in. We want to be able to integrate with them and answer questions more like, can we target folks that only consume, they seem to only appear to consume chocolate edibles? How can we bundle a deal with them and target just those users to again then upsell them and have them try a mint, for instance? Instead of just saying, hey, everybody come in on Tuesdays, 10% off, we start to see an erosion of margins there. And so we want to get smart with our loyalty and text blast companies. And those two, I would say, Spring Big and Sprout Analytics are the ones that are taking it to a higher degree than the other folks in the industry.
Thank you, Dylan. We've got a question from Andrew. Blake, if you could share any insight on how medical sales are trending in the past 6 months.
So I don't, off the top of my head, couldn't give you any numbers specifically how medical sales are trending, but we do tend to see in states where medical programs were first prevalent and adult use sales get legalized, we do tend to see that medical sales go down quite a bit, just because you can typically get, except for like that tax exemption for a customer, for the most part, they're able to buy the same products in adult use. So my guess is probably pretty flat, probably not a huge amount of growth in medical sales. But that's something absolutely we can kind of make a follow up on and send out some more information on after this presentation.
Yeah, and for anyone, we can explore different parts of the industry in Oregon. So please feel free to reach out if there's something that you're interested in knowing. We're going to do many more of these webinars and do them in little tidbits and exploring certain aspects of the industry, or the market in Oregon. So please feel free to reach out with any questions that you have or areas that you want us to explore. But just know that you do have the ability to do this on your own, and it gets really fun when you start going into a headset media like whole, exploring some of this data. Okay, Headset's next targets for expansion. Are we solely focused on adult use sales? So we're not solely focused on adult use sales. As I mentioned, we just launched Michigan yesterday. Really excited about that. We're hoping to get Arizona turned on prior to Arizona vote in November. So it's looking good on that front. And then more states or more markets on the East Coast. So we should be rolling out by the end of the year, probably another 3 markets or so. And for now, those will be adult use states. Though, as I mentioned, we have our software being used in 31 different markets throughout the US and Canada. But we really focus on turning on the market. We can turn on a market once we're at a point of saturation within that state or market. And so right now, those states of focus for us are a couple East Coast states, but Arizona should be the next one that we're going to be rolling out with, and Massachusetts as well. We've got another one from John on the retailer side. Does the ability exist to analyze the overall dispensary data down to the granular bud tender level, i.e. bud tender, a basket looks like X. Yes, absolutely. This is the benefit of the retail platform. So there's two pieces to the retail platform. There's the Pulse piece, which really focuses on inventory, understanding your sales staff performance, understanding product affinity for that your sales staff, where discounts are being applied. All of that is available for you in the free version of the retail platform. Dylan will be happy to set up time with you, John, if you want to take a look at what that looks like, but this is all possible. Francesca, thank you for the nice words. Wonderful. We've got one more, from Anthony. We'll be tracking data for hemp-based CBD items that are in non-cannabis retail opportunities. So no, not as of now. We are focused on, legal adult use dispensaries. But this, I'm sure we can do this type of analysis through, Nielsen does a lot of this. So in our partnership with them, that is possible exploration. Cool. John, thank you for the nice words. Any last questions or comments? Okay, well, I would just remind everyone in the chat box, you can get access to signing up for Insights Pulse and doing some of this exploration on your own. But feel free to reach out to Blake, Dylan, Nate, or myself. I will throw in our emails really quickly here. And yeah, we thank you for your time today, and we hope to see you all soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Great talking to you today.
Bye, guys.